When the fashion world thinks it can set the direction of a career and the image of a Jungkook, they forget one basic thing. Jungkook is not just a model, not just an advertising star, and not even just the face behind the Calvin Klein logo. It is a pop culture magnet, an indescribable creative force, and a global phenomenon that even the American fashion industry must learn to adjust to. It all started with one bold decision Calvin Klein made in early 2023, choosing Jungkook as its global ambassador. At the time, many considered this move a safe strategy to reach Asian markets, especially South Korea and Japan. But unbeknownst to Calvin Klein, the decision opened up something much bigger than they had planned. When the first photo of Jungkook's campaign was released, with minimalist black and white poses, cold but smoldering expressions, the digital world exploded. It wasn't just BTS fans who reacted. Fashion editors, journalists, and even other designers were in the spotlight. Jungkook is not just wearing Calvin Klein, he brought the brand back to life. But beneath that glamorous spotlight, there's an interesting dynamic rarely known to the public. How Calvin Klein is trying to keep full control of Jungkook's narrative, and how Jungkook is slowly reversing the situation, turning the relationship into a balanced, even reversed course. When the first campaign was a resounding success, Calvin Klein's creative team tried to reinforce Jungkook's image with the brand's signature style, sensual, assertive, and a little rebellious. However, at this point, subtle friction appears. Jungkook, with his artistic instincts and awareness of the global influence he has, begins to get more involved in every decision. He is not just present as a face in front of the camera, but wants to know the concept, visual direction, and even the meaning of the message behind the campaign. In an internal interview leaked to the fashion media, one of Calvin Klein's creative directors once called Jungkook a brand dream and brand challenge. A dream and a challenge in one figure. Because, on the one hand, whatever Jungkook wears immediately sells hard. But, on the other hand, Jungkook doesn't want to be a pawn. He knew his power was too great to be constrained by an American-style template. Jungkook forced Calvin Klein out of their comfort zone, and oddly enough, the public loved the result. When Calvin Klein planned to highlight the concept of raw masculinity, Jungkook actually changed it to emotional authenticity. He refused to be strong. He wanted to show a fragile side, a real side, a side that challenged the image of conventional male models in fashion. The result? Jungkook's campaign photos always feel more human, more alive, closer to the reality of today's generation. That's the turning point. Calvin Klein began to realize that they were no longer leading the narrative. It was Jungkook who became the compass of direction. Whatever he does outside of the campaign, whether it's a simple photo post on Instagram, an appearance at the airport, or her new haircut, instantly resonates with Calvin Klein's communication strategy. His every move became an unofficial marketing reference. Every style of dress that seemed spontaneous turned into editorial inspiration. It was not Calvin Klein who set Jungkook, but Jungkook who naturally created the trends that Calvin Klein followed. The fashion world calls it reverse branding, a rare phenomenon in which public figures control the visual direction and identity of a global brand, rather than the other way around. But that's what happened here. When the global campaign Calvin Klein 2024 Icons was designed, the internal team initially prepared a heavy and spaced concept, but Jungkook asked that his tone be friendlier, more down-to-earth, highlighting freedom instead of fantasy. He wants everyone to feel like they can wear Calvin Klein without having to look like a celebrity. That was the idea that later became the basis of the narrative Everyone's Icon. a direction that made collection sales increase sharply and changed the public's perception of the brand. At this point, their relationship reaches a new level. Calvin Klein, who used to be a controller, is now a collaborator. In fact, many industry analysts refer to the Jungkook-Calvin Klein relationship as a case study in the transformation of brand communication in the post-celebrity era. That in the present, the face is no longer a promotional tool, but a narrative bridge between the company and the global audience. And Jungkook played it elegantly. But this journey is not always smooth. There was a moment when Calvin Klein tried to time the release of Jungkook's content on social media to align with their global strategy. But Jungkook chose to post a photo of himself outside the official schedule. That simple post of the evening actually shifted the entire media algorithm, driving Calvin Klein's engagement up organically without a single ad dollar. The marketing world is silent. They realize Jungkook has an instinctive sense of when the world is ready to react something that can't be calculated on a spreadsheet. This is what sets Jungkook apart from other ambassadors. It is not trained for promotion. He lives the brand. He made Calvin Klein not just clothes, but a new symbol of identity for a generation that refused to be compartmentalized. When rumors appeared that Calvin Klein was planning to expand the range in the direction of street luxury style, many thought that the decision came from market analysis. But insiders know, the inspiration came from Jungkook. Her style, which combines a classic denim jacket with a loose hoodie, or a plain white t-shirt with oversized pants, is a direct inspiration for their new collection. In a post-event interview, one of the designers even mentioned, "We used to ask what fits Jungkook. Let's see what Jungkook is wearing." That is the highest point of influence of an individual in an industry that is usually controlled by creative councils and trend analysts. Jungkook has transformed Calvin Klein from a style-leading company to one that follows the style he created. And all this happens without the need for official statements, without drama, without controversy, only through authenticity, intuition, and consistent charisma. If you look deeper, the reason Jungkook can't be controlled isn't because he's rebellious, it's because he understands who he is. Since his time as a BTS trainee, Jungkook has shown a reluctance to follow a formula that doesn't make sense to him. He always believed that true credibility comes from honesty of expression, not from image management. That's what he brought to the fashion world. It doesn't try to be sexy, mysterious, or charismatic. It's just being herself. And that's exactly what makes it so much stronger. Many brands are trying to replicate Calvin Klein's strategy by looking for their own version of Jungkook. But so far, nothing has worked, because Jungkook can't be engineered. This is not a PR strategy. He is the result of a long, authentic journey, from the concert stage to the photo studio, from the sweat of practice to the light of the world's spotlight. That's what makes him different from other ambassadors. Even when Calvin Klein held a new campaign for the opening of a flagship store in Tokyo, rumors circulated that Jungkook would perform, but until the last moment, there was no official confirmation. This strategy intrigued the world, but some analysts were sure. The decision to postpone the announcement was not from Calvin Klein, it was from Jungkook himself. He knows the best time to show up. He knows when the world has to wait. And in the end, that's his strength. Control over the moment. In the fashion industry, timing is everything. But for Jungkook, time is not pressure, it's a means of expression. He appears not because it is scheduled, but because the time is right. So when he finally stepped into the next campaign, the world was back in uproar. From New York to Seoul, from Paris to Jakarta, everyone is talking about it. And behind the glittering photos and artistic visuals, there is a silent but firm message. No one can control Jungkook. Not Calvin Klein, not an agency, not a marketplace. Because Jungkook is not just part of the system, it is the new system itself. He flipped the old hierarchy of fashion, proving that true power comes not from brands that hold power, but from individuals who know who they are. Calvin Klein may have tried to control it, but in the end, the world revolved around Jungkook. When Calvin Klein first signed with Jungkook, they had a clear vision to shape a new image that was more youthful, bold, and global. They wanted to mold Jungkook into the ideal Calvin Klein icon. Sexy but elegant, mysterious but highlighting the brand's signature American confidence. But they don't know what they designed as image control actually turned into image revolution. Because Jungkook is not a raw material for shaping, it is the energy that influences, not the one that is influenced. In each photo shoot, Jungkook showed great artistic intuition. Not just the pose and direction of view, but how he interprets clothing as a medium of communication. When Calvin Klein's creative team asked for the expression cool and detached, Jungkook added a touch of calm but intense. When they wanted to present sexy confidence, Jungkook actually performed with quiet charisma. All those small decisions seem simple, but they have a big impact. Because whatever he does always feels more real than expected. It does not portray a character. He became that character. And in a fashion world that is often caught up in artificial concepts, authenticity like this is the most deadly weapon. Imagine this. Shooting in a New York studio, production teams from different countries with tight schedules and high expectations. But as soon as Jungkook stepped in, the atmosphere changed. It does not come with a superstar aura, but rather with a hypnotic calm. He pays attention to the details of the lighting, examines the texture of the fabric, makes sure that his gestures are in harmony with the feel of the dress. For many in the studio, this came as a shock because normally, stars of Jungkook's class just come, pose, finish. But not with him. He treats the creative process like a part of himself. And that's where Calvin Klein started to lose control, not because they lost direction, but because they found a new direction that they didn't even plan on. When the Jeans Reloaded campaign was released, many thought that all visual decisions came from CK's creative team. But according to leaks from the campaign photographer, some of the lighting concepts and poses actually came from Jungkook's own ideas. He proposed that the lighting be made softer so that the skin and texture of the jeans look real on camera. It rejects heavy filters, rejects excessive digital effects, and asks for results that feel like candid photos with a touch of editorial art. The decision sounds trivial, but the effect is amazing. The campaign was considered one of the most intimate in the history of Calvin Klein. Fashion Media wrote, "It's not Jungkook and Calvin Klein, it's Calvin Klein through Jungkook. That is, the world sees the brand through Jungkook's glasses, not the other way around." That was the moment when Jungkook began to shape a new era. An era in which the face of the brand was no longer a promotional tool, but the center of gravity of the narrative. Calvin Klein realized they weren't leading a campaign. They were following the rhythm of someone bigger than the fashion system itself. And that's where the magic happened. Calvin Klein's men's collection that year became the best-selling of the past decade. But there is something else more interesting. Jungkook managed to change the public perception of sexy in the fashion industry. Previously, Calvin Klein always relied on sensual visuals, firm muscles, piercing gaze, dramatic lighting. But with Jungkook, that appeal becomes more subtle. It brings a new definition, Sensuality without force. It does not show off strength. It channels an infectious calm. This is what makes the campaign viral not only among BTS fans, but also in the Western fashion world, which is getting tired of the exploitive concept of sensuality. Jungkook presents a rare balance between strength and softness. He shows that men can look authoritative without being domineering, can look sexy without being aggressive. Calvin Klein initially tried to shape that image, but it was Jungkook who reshaped the meaning of their brand. Calvin Klein changed its image from American coolness to global humanity. In each portrait, he sells not only clothes, but feelings, closeness, simplicity, sincerity. When CK's marketing team asked how he keeps his natural expression in front of the camera, Jungkook simply replied, "I don't think I look cool. I'm just trying to be myself." This phrase later became the inspiration for the narrative of the next campaign, "Be Your Own Icon." But behind it all, there is a much more subtle strategy than Jungkook. He knew that the more he tried to be honest, the stronger the resonance it created. For his fans, Jungkook's honesty is a mirror. For Calvin Klein, that honesty is a selling point. For the fashion world, honesty is a revolution. And interestingly, Jungkook did it without changing his signature style: a white t-shirt, denim pants, a leather jacket, and plain black hair. All simple, but with his presence, that simplicity turns into a fashion statement. The world calls this phenomenon the Jungkook effect, an effect that makes all simple things seem incredible just by being touched by its presence. That's proof that Calvin Klein may be trying to shape Jungkook's image, but the opposite is true. Jungkook is shaping the direction of their fashion culture, from fashion style, visual tone, to how they communicate with the audience. Jungkook changed what fashion is to what it means to man. It is shaping a new era where authenticity is more important than aesthetics, and silence is more powerful than the spotlight. In his silence, in his simplicity, Jungkook is reversing the old rules of the world's fashion industry. And while everyone thinks she's just a model, she's actually rewriting the history of who really has control in the image world.